Well, Happy New Year, everyone. Technically, I'm late. I know we're nearly halfway through the year, but it's already started to go past a crazy pace. I want to say thank you for returning and coming back to share these conversations with us. I've had a fantastic time while I've been away. Awards and things have been happening, but I'll tell you about those in later episodes. What I want to do is to check in with you, make sure you're all right. I know you can see me, Yvonne and Chantelle from BHA. We are here, we are back, and we are raring to go with the speakeasy to challenge the stereotypes, the myths, and the visions or versions of ourselves that we hold inside our shadowlands that we are not even aware we have. It's about touching, stabbing, and even breaking the taboos, but firstly speaking them into our consciousness so that we can challenge them. As you know, I'm a woman who lives with HIV, and the diagnosis was something, but the living with it was a completely life-changing experience. And one of the things that I struggled with was who to tell and what do we as women understand about HIV. So what I did was I asked a group of wonderful women if they would come online with me to talk about HIV and our experiences. Some of the women who I interviewed with Chantelle are positive and some are negative. And we wanted to have, if you like, a roundtable talk about HIV and women. And we recorded the sessions. We're going to talk through them, some of the questions and some of the responses, but it was an opportunity to start that conversation. This isn't always about doing the easy because everybody can do that. We are tackling HIV and sexual health, and we wanted to throw the ball in your court. So, hi Chantelle, I hope you're well. Are you ready for the year?
Yes, I've had a nice break. Thank you. Happy New Year to you too, and to all the viewers, everyone who gets involved with the Speakeasy show. Thank you for inviting me along to the roundtable discussion as well. A lot of interesting points came out, and I'm ready to get the video rolling and let's go a bit more in depth with some of the stuff that we did speak about.
Okay, without further ado, press that button and let's do our roundtable talk, HIV and women.
Welcome and thank you guys for being here, ladies. Let's give ourselves the credit. I think it's a fantastic opportunity, really grateful. I was just saying earlier that there are, for many people, few things about HIV that we are grateful for. It's not a diagnosis that people take lightly, and that's correct. For me, one of the gratitudes that I have in terms of my HIV diagnosis is the people that I get a chance to meet. And today I have been really blessed with the opportunity to meet some fantastic ladies. This event has been created because Anna wanted to talk about what it's like to be diagnosed. As most of you know, I've lived with HIV for quite a while. Meeting Anna was an opportunity for me to reflect on my journey and how far I've come. But we thought it would be a great opportunity to sit with other women and talk about our experience, not only with women who were positive, but those who were negative, so that we could bounce it around, if you like, and share our experiences. Anna, can you start then by telling us about your experience and what made you come up with this idea for this podcast webinar?
Yeah, so hi everyone, I'm Anna. I've been diagnosed with HIV just like shortly. I'll say I'm a baby to this, HIV arena. Back in 2019, it was very devastating, as you may be aware of that. It's not like a diagnosis that comes easily, and I found myself with two options. So basically, or just to turn this negative diagnosis into like a positive experience, or just, go downhill, be depressed, miserable. And I said, yes, I will, choose the positive side of it. So basically what I found when I discovered, for the first year, I didn't want nothing to do with diagnosis. I knew I was HIV positive, because every time I look around, I'm HIV positive, I'm HIV positive. I said, I'll deal with that later, because I had like some priorities in my life. And I didn't want, this diagnosis, to be on the way. So basically, to be honest, to be HIV positive is kind of, because I always wanted to be a nurse, ended up not being a nurse, but it's like putting on that perspective, like it's kind of like wearing the same shoes of someone, and then you can resonate with those people and understand, the impact that it can have in your life. And yes, I said there was a time where I was very depressed back in October last year. And I said, that's it. I need to do something about this, because to be honest, I know people, since I was very young, that were HIV positive. But when I say I know people, it's like people very close to me. And there were people that I actually helped, through the treatment and adherence and this and that. And I was like, I never look at them like any different. They're just a person with an illness, a chronic illness. And I start to look at me in a different way. And I start to create this, internalized stigma. And I was very upset with myself, because that was never like a thing to me. So why I'm doing this to myself? And I knew fully well that was wrong. So I said, no, this needs to stop. So after like depression and counseling, I said, okay, I need to do something different. So I decided to create my page, my Instagram page. And I said, yes, I'll just start off, to provide some information about HIV, tell a bit about my story, putting like some quotations that relates to my story, how I feel at the time. And they start to build up. And because I've been in touch with Georgia House Trust, I've met Yvonne. Yes, she put me on the women's WhatsApp group. We started to have like talks, conversations, meetings, events, this and that, participating more. And I was like, actually, I can't do this, because honestly, the illness itself, I've got some knowledge about the illness, because not just, from like school, academic knowledge, because I've done a biomedical science degree. I know all the physical side of the illness. But I was like, so I've got this knowledge. Now I've got the lived experience. I think I can, bring so much into the HIV arena, and people can learn from my history, like my story, that you can live happily with HIV. You can. So this is a possibility. It's no longer a death sentence, as people still, stuck in the 80s. Yeah, that's why I want to do this, and be able to be with HIV negative women on this panel. I think it's very powerful, because we talk so much about HIV, but on this closed environment, the HIV environment, we need to spread the message, because this can affect anyone, regardless of your status, your, culture, background. So we need to bring this message to those HIV negative, people. That's why I decided, yes, to start.
Okay, then. Because you said HIV negative, I would like to ask Mena how you met Anna, and how her being positive has affected you as a negative woman. How has it affected your relationship, and how you look at HIV?
So I have dealt with HIV for a while, because of course I have a close person that is HIV positive. When Anna was diagnosed, it was a shock, of course, because I know the way Anna is, and Anna was one of the friend group that she always advises when we start a relationship, to protect herself and all that. And when she told me what happened to her, I was shocked, of course. I cried, of course. Even though I knew a lot about the disease, I was afraid for her, And of course, she's my best friend. We always been together. She's more than a best friend. She's like a sister to me. And it affected me a little bit, of course, but at the same time, I knew it was not a death sentence. Like, when I heard first time, because when I came in contact and to know about this disease was when I was like 14 at school. And that time it was like kind of a death sentence for the person, because we didn't know a lot about it. And a couple of years after, a person related to me was diagnosed as positive, very close to me, it was related as positive. And that time I was completely lost, to be honest, when the person told me, because I thought, okay, this person is not going to survive more than 5-10 years. And now it's different. It's different because you can have a normal life. You can have kids. You can have a partner. You can a person who has positive can be your partner, no problem at all. You cannot transmit if you are doing the correct treatment. Yes, it was a shock at first, but it's like I said, it gave me opportunity to learn more as well, because for many years it's like we forgot about it because other disease came about and it becomes priority. And I think HIV was put on the background and people kind of forgot about it. And I think, for example, in the Portuguese community is still something we don't talk at all, you know? And I think it's like, I, as a mother, I should learn about it more, and I should be starting talking about it. You know, I said to Anna, people go to parties and they have rubbish conversation. I think we should get to this party and have conversation that has meaning, you know, that is gonna do something to our community, because they lack of knowledge of these. And I'm here to learn with all of you and to see if I can pass on to other humans in our community as well, you know. They need to learn.
Sorry.
Just gonna stop it there, because what sticks out to me is, you know, people's reactions regardless of their knowledge of HIV. So having awareness of HIV, how it's acquired, knowing that it's not a death sentence and stuff anymore, and knowing people that are living with HIV, and being supportive of that, really judging it, but then how it feels for someone who is living with HIV, that internal stigma, and basically all the knowledge and, you know, the compassion and whatnot that you've got for other people, it's, you don't have that for yourself.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, because Anna used the term internalized stigma, and that is about everything that you know about a particular subject is held inside your brain. You're not conscious of it, but it's almost like your brain, when you're given a subject, it runs to the library inside your head and draws down everything that it knows. And what people tend to know about HIV is that you die very quickly after acquiring it, and people don't like you, and you are in some ways, you know, pushed to the margins of society. So you've got this fear of a diagnosis, you're going to die, you cannot talk about it. And you're right, it doesn't matter that you are knowledgeable, you might have gone to university. I've noticed one thing to be true, that when everybody gets, all the people that I've known and talked to about HIV, when we get the diagnosis, we go into shock. And it doesn't matter whether you're positive or you're negative, because Mena also said when she heard, she went into shock as well. It's not just that, it's the HIV diagnosis, but everyone jumps to, I'm gonna die, she's gonna die, and how we manage that as an emotional response, purely emotional, because you don't respond to HIV with common sense.
And just looking at like those two options that she gave herself, like immediately, like do we go into like a depressive, miserable state, or do we turn this into like a positive? Was that the same for you?
It was harder for me. I was diagnosed right at the beginning. So in 1998, when the medication or even the awareness that there was medication was still fraught with a lot of fear. So if people knew there was any medication, it was AZT, and AZT had been proved to be very toxic. I wasn't aware. And at the time I was given the diagnosis, there wasn't much options out there. And like many people in my community, I was very wary about medication anyway. I got the diagnosis. HIV was still really new in the community and still really an unknown quantity, like we have with COVID at the moment. All the fear that surrounds the pandemic at the moment, when it first arrived, people doing crazy things, crazy behaviors, people not being sure. I was in the midst of that storm and then told I too had HIV, and I was petrified. I just thought I was going to die. That loomed really large. And I did what Anna did, which is I just went into denial because I thought, I cannot handle this. You've given me too much. And I did not know where to turn. And I was terrified about who I could tell and how they would respond to me. So my not being able to cope with it lasted a lot longer than Anna's, because I didn't at the time know where to go, where to get good information. And although places like George House Trust existed, it was predominantly gay men. And I thought that isn't a space for me. So I didn't go anywhere. And then when I did talk to some friends and family, the response was negative. So that only compounded my feelings of fear, because I watched those around me shut down. And so I shut down further. I really couldn't cope with it. And it took me being very ill before I had to face the diagnosis. And in that time, things had turned around massively. But I thought it was important that Anna had the opportunity to recognize that what she was doing was beating herself up and damning herself with a view about HIV that was based in old knowledge. Mena said it as well, you know, that HIV has changed, the medication has changed, how we manage it has changed, and the life that you can have has changed. And yet a lot of people don't know that. They get the diagnosis and then they...
And that's it.
Yeah,
that's it. Like the whole thing in speaking about HIV within that community, people that work in that profession, people that know about it, if you know someone that's living with it, it's contained in there. And just the importance of sharing that awareness with other people. So it was quite inspiring that, you know, she took a turn, you know, and decided to share her story and to raise that awareness with other people, which is, you know, stuff that we do in the community. But obviously, like you say, if you're going to get that reaction from those that are closest to you, it's just going to put you in that cocoon even more, isn't it?
Because the things that she said, and I cannot stress how important it is to get support, because at point of diagnosis, remember, the internalized stigma starts, the shock starts. So you get a diagnosis, a long-term life-changing diagnosis. It could be anything, but what we know about HIV is the stigma. And the reason you need to be referred to support agencies like George House Trust, BHA, Terence Higgins Trust, is because there are people there who already live with HIV, who know emotionally what you're going through, but also act as mentors and support about the emotional turnaround. How do I live with HIV? How do I live with the stigma, but also as a medical condition, taking your tablets? You do actually need people to walk you through being afraid and realizing you can manage it, you can handle it, and it's not a death sentence. And I remember Anna was saying she got to the women's group, she got to the WhatsApp, and what's incredible about that is it immediately inside your head breaks that I am the only one narrative. Inside your head, you think nobody else has got it. You don't know. It's not often that we hear about women who are HIV positive, unfortunately. So Anna had this opportunity to jump into this WhatsApp group with loads of women who are HIV positive, to be able to go to an organisation where she saw men and women who are positive, but more importantly, living well, laughing, getting on with their life, because that reinforces that it can be done. And then I think after that, she was right in getting the counselling, because before the negative sets in, the counselling is about supporting you to change your mindset to HIV and to challenge any negative views about yourself that you're starting to develop, and key to be able to talk, which she did. Anna has joined loads of ladies groups. She set up her own WhatsApp page. So I think it's an Instagram page, I beg your pardon.
Yeah.
So she communicates to the world and to anyone. And again, really good, because you can see the response of strangers, and usually supportive, but you also learn how to manage the negative that is out there as well. And the more you learn how to manage that, the better you feel. But I was also, I don't know about you, but I was really pleased with Mena's response, because she came across really knowledgeable, you know, when she said things like, you know, you can have kids, because I don't know how many people are aware about that.
Yeah. If you're thinking it's the end of life, then, you know, that goes along with it. If you've got plans to have children and stuff and you think that's it, you don't have that awareness anyway, do you? It's not something that you think is possible for yourself. So even going out in the community and letting people know that you can live a long, healthy, happy life, living with HIV, it's so important. You can have children and not pass on HIV to your child. Yeah, that awareness is just so important to spread around within our communities as well.
Definitely need to do more talking about it, because I think both of them said that one of the game changers was getting the correct information. So there is a website called NAM, National AIDS Manual, and it gives absolutely loads of information. It talks about healthy diet, which everyone should be doing, but it talks about relationships, because to have children, you have to have sex. And so I think one of the things I learned was the amount of taboos I have in my own head about sex, and how do I have sex if I'm HIV positive? How do I have partners? How do I manage rejection? How do I talk to GPs? What's the medication about? What's a good medication for me to take? And are there more women out there? The National AIDS Manual was brilliant for giving me a lot of information, but what I liked about it is I could go at my own pace. And the link to getting onto the website is, I think it's www.nam, N for Nancy, A for actor, M for mother. If you just put that in, NAM and HIV, the website will come up, but there is a private section. And if you are linked with George House Trust, you can access that information if you're HIV positive. But I think there is a need for more open information for anyone to access who needs to understand more about HIV, because in general, men have pointed out that most of our views about HIV are still rooted in the 80s when it first came out, and there hasn't been a lot of updating about HIV at all, and I think that's crucial.
Thank you for that information, and thanks for sharing your experiences as well, Yvonne. I'll press play and continue with the video.
Yeah, so can I ask then, all of you, what is your earliest memory of HIV and how did that impact on you? And then after that, we can go around and finish the introductions. But yeah, because for all of us, we're saying that there is this shock factor, and I'm trying to drill back to why.
the first time I got to know about HIV, like I said, was in school. It was just, it was far for me. It was like 14. It was beginning of at the end of 80s, beginning of 90s. So it was like, okay, it's something that is going around, but it was far from us. But of course, 2 years later, it came very close to me because I started helping in an association, and it was to help people who had drug addictions. And of course, we had meetings, and a friend of mine invited, because he could choose people to invite to these kind of meetings to speak about themselves. And a friend of mine invited me to this meeting, and it was the first time that I heard I'm positive. And of course, because my knowledge was so only school based, and then it was early 19, it was like a really big shock, because I was like, okay, this person is gonna die, But thank God, he followed the treatment, and he's still alive till today. So has gone 30 years, and he has a normal life, and is married, and it's okay. And
brilliant.
Yeah, he's married. The wife knows she's negative, and they live happily. The only thing about it is the person doesn't talk about it. Yeah, I think it's like this, being Portuguese, our community, they don't talk about it. But there is a danger in not talking about this situation, because it's like, it could be a mentor for young people. It could teach people how this is not this, to overcome this stigma. But because the person doesn't speak, it's like, okay, I accept, yeah. But I was like, when Anna told me she is and she wants to do this, I was like, yeah, I'm gonna help, because I want to be a voice. I want to learn. I want to help my kid. I want to talk to my kid about it. I want to help my friends. Yes.
That's brilliant. Because I think being HIV positive.
Yeah, being HIV positive. The coping mechanism is silence. And I remember back in the 80s, when political groups were being formed, ACT UP, one of their phrases was, silence equals death. For me, it's an emotional and a psychological death, in the sense that to not talk about HIV, I think we think it protects and it is safe, but actually psychologically, what is drilling down is shame. I cannot talk about this.
Because who are you protecting?
Yeah, but I am inherently a bad person. I have done something wrong. I am being punished. I will be punished, so I do not talk about it. I do not have the mechanism to talk about it. How do I talk about, and how do I express what I'm feeling inside and what this is doing to me? The stigma that has been set up is such that if it were any other illness, people would immediately understand the need for the sick person to talk. I need to tell you what I'm feeling. I need to tell you what's happening. And in response, you would get support, and people would ask, people would be interested. HIV silenced the stigma of HIV, silenced the family. They couldn't talk about the shame, which was also about being, for the gay men, it was about being gay, homosexuality. So that silence was compartmentalized and added to the illness, which was seen as a punishment. For me as a woman, it was layered onto being Black, being female, then being HIV positive. So all of these layers of shame meant I couldn't talk about it. And in general, the community did not talk about it. So I couldn't talk. family couldn't talk. I know by talking to my family, they did not know what to do. So they heard. And in some ways, the silence meant that I just got on with life. So I didn't have to put up with being bullied or verbally abused. But actually, internally, there was a lot of struggle, and there were no voices outside of me challenging the negative. And I needed that. And I needed my hugs, and I needed caring, and I needed love. But I needed to be able to talk about it until I came to terms with it. And I think it is really, really important that communities start having these difficult conversations and accessing the resources to be able to have difficult conversations, because the damage is being done not only to the person with HIV, but to families who don't know where to access information, who cannot turn to another person with HIV because they don't know anybody, no one talks about it, and so it persists. So I think Mena makes a really good point about, as a community, if we are still fearful of the outside world and medical science, what do we do as a community to manage HIV and support those and their families who have it? When do we start talking? That was my point.
Yeah, no, yeah, you raise a very, very good point. Thank you. I'm going to continue with this section just to hear other people like where they heard about HIV initially.
Okay.
You're talking about the Portuguese community.
Yeah.
But I know in the Afro-Caribbean community, we struggle. And in general society, we struggle. And you're right, it's like death and taxes. We know that they happen, but we don't talk about them.
Yeah.
Claire, how have you found HIV? Because again, if you go back to the 80s, there was a lot, there was a feeling that it only affected certain groups. And here we are, a group of women talking about its impact on women. What was your first experience?
I think I had to really think about this yesterday. So it's a difficult question. You'd like to think, oh, that was the moment. But for myself, it would have been during sex education lessons at school. So and it was kind of drilled into us like unprotected sex will give you HIV, you know, sharing needles will give you HIV, you know, this is the worst case scenario, but it put the fear of God into me, you know, and it was this message of even, you know, as long back in school, it's this kind of message of if you do these things, this will probably be the consequence. And they kind of used like kind of icons, if you like kind of HIV icons, if you that's how they put it at the time. And for me, it would have been, I remember seeing this picture of Freddie Mercury, and it was like, this is it, like this what could happen, you know. And being part of the LGBTQ community myself, I think I have kind of I've always been kind of around it, kind of the talk, the kind of the stigma that surrounds it. But I must admit, not so much for women. It's always kind of
the men.
Yeah, it is. And I remember those sex education lessons, you kind of do that awkward thing where you have to, you know, girls go off to one side, men go off to the other. And I know that they had an in-depth conversation about, you know, gay sex, men who have sex with men, and that you've got higher risk of. And I remember it wasn't so much for ourselves. And I was thinking, oh, so, you know, does that not apply to me? You know, so I think that was my earliest memory, if I'm honest. And then, yeah, I think for women living with HIV, much later was it kind of part of the dialogue, was it part of the visibility that I see in like kind of the HIV world, and it was always kind of represented really with women giving birth to kind of negative, you know, babies or positive babies, if you like, and kind of it's one of them. It's been a lot later in my life, which is a shame. It should, you know. So yeah, I think that was my earliest memory. Yeah.
Yeah, sounds about right.
Yeah.
Sounds about right, like it being white gay men that get HIV. And like even saying like, you know, her being part of the LGBTQ community, like having that awareness, like being around the conversations, having that knowledge and whatnot, not the same for me.
I agree. Because that was one of the things we said, was the one thing that's drilled into you as a girl is don't get pregnant. Just don't get pregnant. So when you watch it on TV, you see all of these stories about girls having sex. It's taboo anyway. You know you're not supposed to be doing it. And that whole fear around sex, the whole fear that drives the conversation about HIV and sex, you know what I mean? It's frighten you out of having sex as a form of contraception. Just don't do it, because if you do, you'll get diseases like HIV and die. Who would want sex? Who would do it? This whole, and I think the way HIV was managed and the finger pointing that went on with the initial diagnosis and the gay community having to respond meant that the conversations were always only focused on gay men. My concern is we had a blind spot globally. So the UK focused on the UK or the Western response, and yet in Africa, heterosexual sex was leading to HIV and people were dying at the same rate of knots, if not more, than in the gay community. People were dying irrespective of the type of sex they were having, of which heterosexual sex had been ruled out, and yet Africa was statistically proof that it could happen, and yet we stayed blind to that awareness. And in doing that, women weren't factored in, and you were right. Don't get pregnant was the only thing we had to worry about, and for me, that's what I was doing. I 100% never got myself into that situation, and I knew what to do, you know, to take the pill, you know, to go to the clinic. It had never occurred to me to ask about. I wouldn't have even asked. I wouldn't have known how to. I wasn't that confident. And I think the narratives, even today, still don't really clue women into the fact that it happens to us too, and then getting us suited and booted about how we manage our sexual health, then knowing that we too can get HIV.
Just that it's being reaffirmed as well in the schools, because if that is your only education on HIV and you've got no one else that you want to speak to about that, or even anything else to do with your sexual health, but then the kind of head start that men might get because they're being told about, you know, be aware that, you know, if you are having sex with another man, you know, this is a risk. So they've got that knowledge, and that's separate. So the females get that knowledge in school. If you're not getting knowledge elsewhere, and that sticks with you for a long time, and you don't get to come into the profession, or you don't bump into someone from BHA, for instance, whilst you're out in the leisure centre or whatever to have that conversation, how do you know? Why would it affect me?
Yeah.
I'm not a man who has sex with men. Got nothing to do with me.
Which is what I thought when I got the diagnosis. I just thought, this cannot be happening to me because I don't fit into any of the groups they said were high risk. I wasn't high risk. And I think that's what makes it more shocking when you get the diagnosis as a woman, because you have to get your head round then, not only something, you know, this relationship you're in, what's been happening, what conversations didn't we have, but then you're in a group of people who've got HIV, and all that your brain is saying is, this can't happen to me, this should not be happening to me. Based on everything I know, it's not happening. And a lot of us spend a lot of time trying to wrap our heads around how comes this has happened to me. Because the myth is that, you know, you're sleeping around, and a lot of the women I know were married or in long-term relationships, or just didn't ask because they thought, like we all did, it's not on our radar at all. Mm-hmm. So again, as women, we think if we're married, it's a safe place, but marriage doesn't make a safe haven, because if you don't have your conversations with your partner, it can happen to anyone at any time. You can be a young girl learning about sex for the first time. It can be your first partner. If they're not tested, if you're not having that conversation. And so that is the thing that I learned when I had to unpick my diagnosis and my response. It was all the missed opportunities, of which not telling women that we can be affected was key, was one of the key.
Chantelle, help us out here then, because Chantelle works with sexual health. Do you see this kind of mentality or this perception that it is more men that need to focus on their sexual health and women not being included?
I just wanted to reiterate what Claire was saying as well, seeing it as maybe it's a male issue, HIV, and my earliest memory is probably primary school as well. Well, primary school for me, but vaguely just having HIV as AIDS. So no, you were going to die. And then the whole ew about it, you don't know anything. It's just like, you're going to die. And it's just, I don't want that. And then going into college, I was working in the hospital, doing my training. And I remember there was a male in a side room, and I was told to put the apron on, the gloves, the full works, everything, because he was HIV positive. And this was in my college days. And that was like, wow, like, I'm in college, but can I catch HIV if I don't have my gloves and my apron on? So still not really being aware at an older age, which is a shame, because it's important to know a lot younger about, transition, how it can affect you, how to be safe, prevention methods and stuff like that. Working in the communities, working with BHA, we work with BME communities, and speaking about HIV, there is a stigma. It's not really something that people want to talk about, even sexual health as well. We can start the conversation about sexual health, maybe welcome STIs, but the moment you speak about HIV, some people don't really want to engage. And it's the thought of, is it that stigma from that young age and that association of not wanting to be, involved with it, or, have that conversation, so shying away. And that's that lack of knowledge as well. So yeah, being in the community and speaking about HIV, a lot of people aren't aware, because maybe they've got that knowledge from being younger, of TV, news, friends, family, and then just being like, I just don't want to know about it. It doesn't affect me. I'm not at risk. Enough sort of thing, yeah.
Because when it came out in the 80s,
what stuck with me with that is the ew in primary school. What was the ew? Was the ew about men having sex with men? Was the ew HIV? Was the ew sex? Did I even know that that was a transmission route? What was the ew?
And so that is, and I'm glad you saw that in yourself, because when we talk about internalized stigma, look at all the things we've internalized and we're not even aware. And
but to have that reaction in primary school is,
primary school, because if you think about it, by the time you're 11 and already you've learned an attitude towards either gay men, sex, and HIV, and you're only in primary school. So early, and you've also learned that negative ew. So how do we then respond in any other way if there is no other dialogue about it, because I know as a community we're still about being gay. We're still not managing that someone can have sexuality that is different to the boy-girl scenario. We still don't talk about gender fluidity. We're not talking about different types of sexual choices. And so if we deny that they exist, does that stop it from happening? If we don't have the conversations, how do we support those who may be struggling with it? Because I think the not tackling is the akin again to having people who in our community are struggling or managing mental health issues. We know them in the community, but there is no name to why they are different. And it's easy to see them over there. This is a different ball game. Life is always a different ball game, to point finger until you walk in those shoes. And it's about how we do differently now. We can't or shouldn't always be waiting till it's happening to us before we start learning about it and changing the ooze in our community.
Definitely. Just thinking that experience as well, which would have been 20 years ago or something, in a hospital environment, and that treatment of that person that was in the side room and having to glove and apron up and do all that, like, is that still existent today, like with health professionals, with that level of awareness?
I know that I've had in conversation so many of us, it adds to the stigma. It's stigmatizing behaviour. I can't tell you the enormity of human contact and how much it matters to us, and we don't realise it. And when somebody comes into a room double gloved with all of the aprons and visors and things, they come to you like that. What it does is it's an unspoken ooh, and it makes you feel dirty inside and untouchable. And for your mental health, you do not feel good. And I think there are professional practices that healthcare workers, people in the healthcare professions have to adhere to. But sometimes what I see is an exaggerated response to HIV, where there is no need to take blood, to double glove is unnecessary. If the person is undetectable, that means they're on medication and have suppressed the HIV in their body. Putting on aprons, gloves, unnecessary. And it's an awareness that is required, I think, not just in terms of looking after yourself as a medical person, but also in terms of how can I best support this patient without adding to the stigma, without being part of the stigmatizing behavior. And so personal protective equipment is one thing, but checking in, is it appropriate?
Yeah, absolutely. And I know BHA has done some webinars with GPs across Greater Manchester to, do that awareness raising and let them know about the work that we're doing, and that, just looking at how we can come together in terms of that. So yeah, definitely. It's not just about yourself as a practitioner, it's about how can I make this person feel comfortable and what are their needs as well. Like, do I really need to be doing this?
Yeah, and it does make a difference. I can't tell you how I opened up when I met a nurse who read my records. She acknowledged to me openly that she was aware of my HIV status, But then she said, okay, so let's talk about what you need then. How are you? She saw the person first.
Instead of the how is HIV.
Yeah, and ooh, it was about, she didn't deny the HIV, but she made sure I was okay and what did I need. And then she started dealing with me as a whole person. How can I help you today? What are the issues? And it changed my attitude. And it was one of those cases where if I had to see a nurse, I would ask for her, because I knew she saw all of me and she didn't treat me based out of her fear, and it makes a difference. Let's click on again then.
I remember, don't die of ignorance, but I know that everyone and the way it has been leveled in terms of the media, and when there are stories or films that have HIV in at all, it's about a gay man who has to tell or a gay man who finds out. I see no storylines of women except for Vicky Pollard, I think, in Emmerdale. Now, I never actually watched that, but I heard she had a gruesome ending, which I think puts a really bad psychological slant on it if you're a woman who's positive. But I think all the images were men. And for me, my biggest fear, and I don't know about you guys, my biggest fear was make sure you don't get pregnant. Because from the moment I heard HIV or AIDS, men who have sex with men, well, I thought, well, that's okay, then it ain't a problem I need to think about because I'm a woman. End of story. My body makes me impervious. And so I was so used as a woman to hearing, don't get pregnant, that I made sure 100% I didn't get pregnant. It never dawned on me that there was more to relationships than that. I even knew and managed very badly how to manage an STI, but actually negotiating sex never came into it. And I think there's a whole conversation that goes before it that we didn't even look at. Condoms, not condoms. Because when I look at it now, I actually slept with someone and took it as read that he wasn't gonna have a condom on, that if he wanted it, I was gonna have to give it. It's what you do. And that the only thing I needed to protect myself against was pregnancy. Has that changed? Is that still in our forefront as women?
I was just going to touch on that. I was in the community the other day and I was speaking to an older woman, and we were speaking about HIV, within the older communities, and she's talking about her friends and obviously being in a marriage or a partnership for a long time and then separating, and you find yourself single maybe in your 40s or 50s, and your main concern was not getting pregnant, but because you've been through the menopause and whatnot, that's not even a worry. So HIV, STIs, it's out of your head. You're not thinking about prevention methods because you can't get pregnant. So that, like what you're saying there, thinking about, I don't want to get pregnant, that's my main concern. It's still continuing later on in life as well, not just when you are younger.
I think that's a really good point, because you're right. And my concern is, as Mena was saying, if we don't talk about sex, we don't update our way of having conversation. Who has sex? What are our choices? And how we can protect ourselves? Because in having that conversation, our options become available. Because we're talking about, if HIV is out there, very few women know about PrEP. And I don't know how many. Anna, do you know what PrEP is?
Yeah, I know quite well now. But to be honest, until I was diagnosed, I knew there was something about, I didn't know about like the name as a PrEP or PEP as well. But I knew the PrEP was only for gay men at the time, like at least in I didn't know like overall how it is put out in the world, but I knew that in Manchester was only available to gay people, gay men. And I knew about PEP, but not as the name PEP. I knew there was something that if you think like you are at risk and regardless if, like, say, if you had no protection at all, if you had like an incident with the condom, you could go to the emergency department within like a very, very short time. I didn't know it was like the 72 hours for the PEP. And you could get that medication, and then you could prevent you, to be HIV positive. But to be honest, I didn't look into much into that because, again, HIV wasn't affecting me. So it was nothing, that wasn't a thing that I needed to be worried about, because as Mena said, I've always been very cautious about, in terms of, sexual relationships. Not that I said like, that's not going to happen to me. No, it's not that. I don't put that away. I know it can happen to me. That's why I was taking, precautions. But unfortunately, it happened to me. And now I know more about PrEP, that is the pre-exposure prophylaxis you take before, putting or supposedly at risk, or the PEP that is after you've been at risk. You need to take this medication within the 72 hours, and you need to take during 28 days. So it's avoid your HIV, to go into your bloodstream and you become HIV positive. And I think now there's more, funding into the PrEP as well, and it's more available. But at the time it was like a certain, risk group, yes, at risk group, and that's another thing that I don't agree with that, to be honest. And yes, but yeah, now I know, and that's why I want to now, because I know more about it. Because fair enough, I know about the virus, the different stage, how you can prevent. But because now I'm actually HIV positive, I think I'm in a better position, to help and learn as well, still learn with all of you, because this is a learning journey.
Sorry.
No, it's all right, go on.
So the media was the first bit, like, where are women in the media when we're talking about HIV? Again, I've not seen it, like, primary school, high school, whatever, it wasn't a thing. And those that did, you're talking about, was it an Emmerdale episode? And there was that whole negative slant on it. That further, like, just puts that more stigma, don't it, in terms of like women with HIV, and even that ignorance of, we don't get it if you don't see it in the news, but you see like other illnesses being in the news and it's affecting men and women. The media, that was one thing that jumped out at me, but also like not having a dialogue when it comes to talking about sex. So I was doing some outreach in the community a couple of weeks ago, and I've got the table set out, and it's got PASH, which is the partnership that we are part of, that Passionate About Sexual Health, and then Sort HIV, which was the campaign as well. And a lot of people, they want pens, or they want a cup or a t-shirt. That's what draws you over. And they'll be like, oh, can I get a pen? I'm like, yeah, you can. And we'll have that conversation as well. Like, this is what we do, and this is why we're here. And a man came over and he wanted, some of the resources. And I was just explaining what it was about. And when he heard the word sex, it was like, put the pen down. Oh, no. Don't talk about that. And I was like, challenging him, like, why do we not talk about that? And, it's important, it's part of your health, blah, blah, blah. And it was like, no, you keep them things to yourself. So that dialogue isn't there. And especially if you're not getting it at a younger age, it's set root inside of you, isn't it? Like, no, we don't have that conversation. That's private matters. You keep that to yourself, sex. So how do you even start talking about HIV or even pregnancy if you're not going to talk about sex? Because to become pregnant, that is one of the things that you do.
And it's funny because in some ways it'll check me when I'm having conversations, because I keep talking about women becoming empowered to have conversations with their partner, and I'm going at it as if the guys are any more confident. So both parties and not having the conversation because both parties don't know how to. And I always say it's the mumble and fumble moment, isn't it? Because we're mumbling and fumbling in the dark to get to a place we know we want to be, not even show how to get there. But I, looking back now, understand how much more confident or aware you have to be able to have a conversation before sex, so that you become more conscious with your relationships. And that level of consciousness takes a level of confidence that I know most of us don't have, because we're so busy drilling into, as women, we're taught to partner up, that our whole mode of existing is to pair with a man at any expense. You're not pairing with a man because it enhances you. You do it almost as if your life depends on it. And back in the day, historically, you depend on it. Without marriage, a woman had no means to survive. And so therefore you have to put up with, you have to accept whatever your husband delivers to you, and you are even delivered to your husband by your family. So having a conversation where you talk about what you require out of a relationship, we're not prepped for that. And we are not prepped for, okay, how are we going to manage our sex life? And what are your likes? And never. And I still think we are very Victorian. And I think also it may be considered by us as unromantic. Oh, we don't talk about those things. You just fall in love. Well, I now know that if you fall where you land, you may have no control over. So I've had to tweak how I look at romance, long-term relationships and sex, and I would like to empower more of us to be able to have those conversations, including, I think now as a woman, including guys, because maybe the assumption that guys are on the ball is a sexist notion that I have, and maybe they too are mumbling their way, because the image is that the man is in control, so you assume he knows what he's doing.
And that whole thing of like negotiating sex, and as a woman, do I have a choice? Do I have a choice to say what I like, or conditional consent, like anything that goes in that narrative? Do I have a choice to negotiate this, or am I just giving my partner or the man or whatever what he wants because that's what we're conditioned and that's what we've been doing for however many years? And
even learning what we like. We don't learn what we like beforehand.
It's given to you, and it's a purpose of that. The main goal is so that he gets what he likes, you satisfy him.
Yeah, because our goal is to survive. Without him, I don't survive. And then that has whole conversations about women having freedom and rights. But I think, the whole conversation about our choices and what we want, and raising us to believe we exist and that we have choices.
Definitely. We also went into prep there as well, didn't we? And a question that I've asked before, who is it for? Who is prep for? Because when you're out in the community, people, our communities don't know what prep is. But then we talk about the men who are having sex with men community, they're pretty clued up. We had the impact trial, and, they were clued up. Being able to source it online, clued up. Now it's available on the NHS. It's like, who is accessing this? And do you understand that it's for you as well? And what benefits there are in taking PrEP?
And because it flicks back to what I've just been saying, they didn't get given it, they fought for it. So they believed in their own voice. And when it wasn't being offered, they fought for it and got it. But you're right, that narrative still focuses on those who asked for it and got it. And because there's already a discussion and because there's awareness about HIV in the gay community and men who have sex with men, it didn't seem out of place. I know that until I acquired HIV, and even in my running up and down as an activist, I didn't know about PrEP and I didn't know about PEP as a woman until I stumbled over one of your leaflets. And I was absolutely gobsmacked, and I saw it on the counter in a shop. And for me, again, the whole conversation about being able to take control of your sexual health right from the get-go makes assumptions and empowers men but not women, because it keeps, if we keep framing it in this, you have to be a high-risk group, women will continue to miss out because a lot of women are not in these so-called high-risk groups. We need to understand that as long as you are having sex, PrEP exists for you, and that it should be your right and part of your sexual health toolkit as much as the pill is. And that women, girls, should know how to take it beforehand, with or without the pill, and afterwards, 72 hours afterwards, know how to access PrEP, because we're still gearing women up as if we're only functional in terms of our baby reproductive system. That's how we function. So, you know, our biggest worry is about getting pregnant, not getting pregnant. We have more choices than that. And, you know, protecting us against HIV should be part of our choices, and having PEP and PrEP, which are now widely available on the NHS, but it's not advertised. And so many women do not know it's out there. So we can protect against pregnancy still, but not against HIV. 1/3 of the global population with HIV are women, and women who are older acquiring or living with HIV without being aware of it, and it's not being diagnosed because it is still not on our radar, and that needs to change.
Just thinking, like with PrEP as well, I was going through my uni notes, so what, about 15 years ago it would have been, and I seen PrEP in my uni notes, and I was like, I didn't even, thinking that this is the first time I've heard about it, like since working here, I didn't even know that it was like that old. But then maybe was that a thing of, well, it doesn't apply to me because I am not at risk as a Black woman. So I'll write the notes down, but it's not something that I really need to remember. And, you know, could that have been an opportunity where I could have shared that information with someone, you know, between uni and now, but not thought about it because I am not at risk. And it's that whole thing of who is at risk.
Yeah. See, that's that. Yeah. And we need to change that whole at risk. For me, I can't stop screaming from the rooftops loud enough. As long as you are having sex, we're all at risk. Yeah. And that HIV doesn't read the leaflets. Nope. And you can acquire it. First time you have sex, or the millionth time, it's about understanding that as long as you're having sex, we're at risk.
Yep. Okay, so I'm going to play the last section for this part.
How much do you know about it as a professional, healthcare professional? Because I think for a lot of women who will see this now, they'll have heard PrEP and PEP, and it blew my mind at the time because I thought, what's this? And I'm still thinking now it's been rolled out from what I understand. Can you tell us a little bit more about it? Do you have an understanding, please?
Yeah, so for me, I still feel that there's some amazing work that's been done out there. And I think initially it was targeted heavily for men who have sex with men, and I don't think I'm out of order saying that. I don't think, and it's just about, sometimes it's as simple as visibility, and I think BHA have done like a huge, like such an impactful job of showing, you know, trans and women that actually these, if anything, are probably more at risk because they don't fall into that normalized category of risk group. Do you know what I mean? They're just not kind of into that kind of seen socially as a risk, if that makes sense. So I think to be honest with you, I think as far as visibility is concerned, I think BHA has absolutely nailed it, but I don't see it much anywhere else. And sometimes it's as little as posters, and you see like kind of two men kind of, you know, hugging or whatever, and you think, I would love to see there a black woman, or I'd love to see a trans woman, you know, and I would love to see that representation there. And I know at the time that PrEP was rolled out into England to make it free and access for all, you know, free access, I was kind of like worried, and I was thinking, this needs to be the biggest story out there. This needs to be shouted from the rooftops. This is like the best prevention method, really. And I just didn't, I felt like, why are you quiet? Why are we quiet? You know, and I was like getting people kind of coming to me, creating that safe space, and kind of even staff members coming to me and saying, where would I access that? You know, if I have a pub, where would it? And I was acting as kind of that like signposter, you know, go here, go here, go here. And I'm not a specialist, you know, and I think it's the number one thing is the tick thing is that it's free, you know, but it needs to have equal access for everybody, and I feel it just isn't there yet, particularly for women. But I think putting the question back, how do you feel that the kind of I hate that, I know I've said this before, Yvonne, in kind of George House Trust sessions, this kind of hard to reach groups in society, in the community. How do you think that we can access women? How do you think we can get that message across to women better?
I'll just do a check-in on that, Anna, because for me, the moment you start with the hard to reach, there's a whole problem there.
Yeah.
Bigger than that, we still haven't tackled the whole issue that women can get HIV.
Yeah.
Don't do hard to reach, because at the moment, all women are hard to reach because we don't realize we can get it. We're not, in terms of having a voice or in terms of an awareness by both men and women, we're not there yet. And a lot of my sadness is it's preventable. Make women aware that they are as vulnerable. As long as there are men and women on the planet having sex, our ability to factor in HIV should be as automatic as we factor in not getting pregnant. We have got to understand that it happens to us, and then we have to all take responsibility for our bodies. And so that means a shift in how society teaches women sex for them. Hollywood still portrays sex as something that is done to us by a man, and then, you know, off into the sunset and a curtain starts flapping, and there is no G, put the condom on, or when G says he doesn't want to put the condom on, how many women will think straight away pill, because they don't want to get pregnant, but they don't think pill, PrEP, because I don't want to get HIV. And so I think we've got a really backwards way of having sex. It's for men, we do it. Few of us a raw enjoyment or admit to that side of it. But I think the few of us take control of who we are in our sexual relationships. And it's only since I've become HIV positive that I even realized I could factor myself in and have some control. And then to learn that there is a medication out there that I could have taken beforehand. or after 72 hours after.
Yeah.
You can, most women don't know, we will get the pill, but we won't get PrEP. And I want that message up there. And the reason I'm checking in on who we think is because a hard to reach woman can be a woman who lives in rural Cheshire and husband is booted with cash, or she's booted with cash, or she's a high exec. She can be a woman who lives in Oldham who's a lollipop lady, as long as any of us are having sex with guys, whether it's our first time at whatever age or we're re-entering the market, we have got to understand that HIV doesn't discriminate. And I think if we narrow the focus as if there's a problem with talking about us as hard to reach groups, because if you sexualize our behavior, we're not actually looking at the wider picture. So it's about educating women, young girls, into our options and how to negotiate, or even just to think about what sex is safe for me right now, if that makes sense. I don't know.
I was on fire.
Yeah. And I'm just like, what's going to happen? What are you going to ask next?
Ow. I think right at the start of our session, I used what people may think is really a weird phrase, the blessing of HIV, because who could see HIV as a blessing? And so I would qualify that by saying it took something as devastating as an HIV diagnosis to get me woke to not only my sexual health, but to my whole self. I've had to do a lot of soul searching, and I've had to do a lot of checking ins, loads of check-ins that I never expected to do, to get to a position where I talk passionately about sexual health. So I wouldn't be as self-aware or as confident. I wouldn't have had the opportunities that I have had if I hadn't have had the diagnosis. The walk was not easy, and I would not say to anyone, get HIV if you want to become more confident. It is just the way it happened for me. And so it is, the blessing is that I have learned life's lessons and that I have had the opportunity to be with people who've taught me how to live well with HIV, which is the critical thing. They made a difference. But it has left me passionate, because you don't need to learn these life lessons by acquiring HIV. And if I can prevent anyone going through what I've been through, then I will. But my goodness, what a journey.
Thank you, Yvonne. Thank you. So I'm going to wrap this, which is one part of the discussion on women talking HIV. I hope you've been able to take away some things from the discussion that we've had today. And if there's anything that you want to ask, feel free to email us on speakeasy@thebha.org.uk. And looking forward to doing the next part to discuss some more of women talking HIV. See you soon.
We'll see you soon. Take care. Bye.